Today, we're going to unpack something pretty heavy. We're diving into an expert analysis that connects a single regional conflict to a cascade of global crises that can impact everything, from the food on your plate to the phone in your hand.
Okay, let's just start with that. Let that sink in for a second. The stakes are, well, about as high as they can possibly get. We're talking about a scenario where a conflict doesn't just stay local, it could literally trigger a worldwide famine. So, how could that even happen?
Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we're going to look at the one tiny geographic spot where this all starts. Then, we'll get into the 3 critical resources that are at risk. From there, we'll walk through the 5 potential ways this whole conflict could end, according to the source. Then we're going to pivot to something that seems totally separate, an AI crash. And finally, we'll pull it all together to see just how fragile our world really is.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the global choke point. We're talking about a place called the Strait of Hormuz, because as you're about to see, pretty much everything hinges on what happens right here.
So what is it, exactly? Well, think of it like this. It's the only way out. It's the one narrow sea passage connecting the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world's oceans. That means all the oil, all the gas, and tons of other resources have to squeeze through this one little waterway to get anywhere.
And when I say narrow, I mean narrow. The actual shipping lane, the path the giant tankers have to take, is just 21 kilometers wide. That's it. That puts it easily within range of Iranian weapons, which gives them a terrifying amount of control over who gets through and who doesn't.
And that vulnerability? Well, that's where the dominoes start to fall. Which brings us to Section 2, the 3 critical shortages. A blockade in the Strait of Hormuz doesn't just stop one thing. It threatens 3 absolute pillars of our modern lives.
First up, and stick with me here, is fertilizer. I know it might not sound as dramatic as oil, but according to the source we're looking at, it's every bit as important. It's the stuff that helps grow the food that feeds, the entire planet. Simple as that. No fertilizer, no food.
And this is why it's so scary. Look at this chart. The expert points out that a staggering 20 to 30%, almost a third, of the whole world's fertilizer supply has to pass through that tiny 21-kilometer choke point. That's a huge chunk of our ability to grow food, all hanging by a thread.
And this quote just lays it out plain and simple. The math is brutal. You lose 20% of the fertilizer, you lose 20% of the food, period. This isn't just some regional problem. We're talking about a global famine.
Okay, the second critical shortage is one that most of us never ever think about. Helium. And no, it's not just for birthday balloons. The expert makes it clear that helium is what's called a non-substitutable element. That means there is nothing else that can do what it does, and it is absolutely vital for the technology we use every single day.
So why is it such a big deal? Well, it's essential for making semiconductors. The tiny brains inside your phone, your computer, your car, everything. About 30% of the entire world's supply comes right out of this region. And get this, a country like South Korea, which makes 2/3 of the world's memory chips, relies on this region for 65% of its helium. And here's the real kicker. You can't stockpile it. It's so small, it literally leaks through solid steel. So when the supply stops, manufacturing just stops.
And that brings us to the 3rd critical shortage, the one everyone talks about the most, energy. We're talking oil and natural gas. But the expert we're citing frames its importance in a way that really shows you how it's connected to, well, everything.
This chart right here says it all. It's a powerful visual. On one side, you have the change in global energy use. On the other, the change in the entire world's economic output. And look at them. They move in almost perfect lockstep. When energy goes up, the economy grows. When the energy supply gets squeezed, the whole global economy shrinks with it. There's no separating them.
So with these massive shortages looming in the background, where does this all go? That brings us to Section 3, the 5 potential endgames. These are the possible and frankly terrifying outcomes of this conflict, as laid out by the source expert.
Okay, so the expert outlines 5 potential scenarios, and they are all incredibly serious. First, the total destruction of Iran, which would likely involve nuclear weapons. Second, Iran retaliates by wiping out the power infrastructure of its neighbors in the Gulf. Third, something called the Samson Doctrine, where Israel, facing a threat to its existence, uses its own nuclear arsenal. Fourth is the flip side, the idea that Iran could somehow disable Israel's nukes. And fifth is the outcome where Iran successfully develops its own nuclear bomb.
All right, now we're going to take a sharp turn. It's going to seem completely unrelated at first, but the expert presents this as a parallel crisis that could make everything worse. Section 4, the coming AI crash.
The argument here is that what we're witnessing with AI right now is a classic boom and bust cycle. We've seen it before with things like the railways or the dot-com bubble. A revolutionary new technology appears. A tidal wave of investment money rushes in, creating a massive boom. But eventually, reality sets in, and the bubble pops, leading to a painful bust.
And here are the numbers that paint the picture. According to the source, by 2026, for every $5 being spent on AI, only $1 is going to be earned back in revenue. That 5-to-1 ratio of spending to income is described as just completely unsustainable. It's a textbook sign of a financial bubble that's just waiting to burst.
And what happens when a bubble like that finally pops? You get this. The analysis points to a jaw-dropping 90% failure rate for AI startups in 2026. When that much money and investment just vanishes into thin air, it doesn't just hurt the tech world, it sends shockwaves through the entire global economy.
And this is where it all comes together, our final section, our fragile world. How does a geopolitical conflict, a supply chain nightmare, and a tech bubble all connect?
So what's the big takeaway from all this? I think it's that the systems we all depend on every single day for food, energy, technology, you name it, they're not nearly as strong as we think they are. A conflict in one tiny waterway can threaten to starve the world. A frenzy over a new technology can threaten the financial system. The expert's core lesson is that these aren't separate problems. They're all symptoms of one deeply interconnected and incredibly fragile global system.
Which really leaves us with this final question to think about. We usually measure the cost of a conflict in the immediate damage, right? But in a world with all these hidden connections, where one single event can ripple across our food, our energy, and our technology, what is the true full cost? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me.